Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar. I'm Sita Shah with FSD Kenya. I lead the Affordable Housing Program. And we're really excited today to see so many of you join. We'd like to share some tools we've created that would support the sector. And I would have to say at the outstart, we all appreciate that the tools are a work in progress, and we're really, really open to feedback. I think we've got quite a few people already on the call, but I would wonder whether we still give a few more minutes for people to join. You can see the agenda on the screen. We'll roughly give about 10 minutes to each of the different speakers and have 5 minutes for questions following straight after. And then we're hoping to save at least a good 20-30 minutes for general questions, which Kessia Rust from the Center for Affordable Housing Finance will be helping to moderate in the chat and helping to walk us through towards the end. FSD launched its affordable housing program in late 2020 with funding from FCDO. And in the last few years, the FSD strategy, the affordable housing strategy, was done in conjunction with Center for Affordable Housing Finance, and we've had several collaborations with them on designing tools and undertaking research to support the sector. So today's webinar is to showcase some of the tools we have developed and are still in development, to kind of get to share with the market what we're doing, get your feedback to help us refine them, and make sure they're useful to the target market. Our agenda includes a review. We've done an online Git book of the review of Kenya's policy and legal framework that we'll start with. We first finished this review in 2022 last year. So we undertook a review of the legal and regulatory framework along Kenya's housing value chain and discovered such a rich and deep array of different policies, laws, etc. But when that review was done, it was actually too dense to consume, and we thought what would be useful would be to convert it to an online Git book that can always be updated. So that will be our first speaker. I invite Muriungi, who helped us develop it, to showcase what we've done, and then we'll have questions after that for this first speaker. Thank you, Muriuki.
Thank you very much, Sita. I'll begin to share my screen. I hope it's visible. It's like my name is Muriungi from CAHF Africa Advocates, based in Nairobi, and we're supporting FSD and CAHF and other partners with this work. And essentially, what this work is about is we saw the need to look through the legal policy and institutional infrastructure that we have that relates to housing, not only just affordable housing, but the entire housing sector in Kenya, simply because even as legal practitioners or property developers or other actors within the entire housing value chain, depending on which value chain you are in, they usually have different issues and different concerns, largely even arising from the law. And we're going to see some of the concerns that, for instance, raised is that the value chain, the housing value chain, from acquiring land all the way to putting up to planning to putting up houses and for them to be off-taken in the market. It's a rather lengthy and sometimes actually bureaucratic whole process that ends up consuming time and resources, and therefore ending up particular times increasing the costs for housing. And that obviously then sort of is really inconsistent with provision of affordable housing. And so for instance, that's one of the things that we notice. And the reason we say this is the review we sought to do ended up yielding about 140 laws, either laws, policies, regulations, or basically the statutory instruments that we were able to uncover were about 140. And that obviously then shows there's a significant regulatory burden on the players in the industry, depending on, irrespective of where you are. So that's so long as you're trying to attempt to deliver housing. We also reviewed a number of cases, almost 50 judicial authorities or cases decided by the courts. And the idea is that the cases generally in law seek to interpret what the law means. So the final decision that is given by a court is actually the law, because it provides an interpretation of what the law is, unless and until it is reversed by a higher court. So I'll quickly go through this. It's now a book, sort of an online book, a Git book, and I'll later on share what we expect or what we hope that you as partners, as our partners in this, we can achieve with it. And so the title is Legal Policy Institutional Review of the Affordable Housing Sector in Kenya, and it simply looks at the legal as well as the institutional arrangements. Institutional arrangements, of course, meaning the institutions, the many institutions that are there within the entire sector. So if you look at, and within that page, this document, like Zita mentioned, was developed, but we've been updating it. The last update was in September. That is this month, but of course there are some further developments that have happened, especially in the land sector within the last 1 week, including some judicial authorities that are yet to be updated. And the idea and the hope is that this will be a living document whereby all partners, and especially those who have the resources and the ability to support this, they could be sending comments. And actually, if you look there, you could see we say that for more information, submit your comments to Beatrice. Beatrice works with CAHF, the Center for Affordable Housing, and she's managing this online book. Therefore, if you have any comment, any update, anything you even disagree with in terms of this analysis, you could actually send a comment to beatrice@housingfinanceafrica.org, and that will be incorporated into this document so that then it becomes a useful tool for supporting various players within the industry. So if you, what we do have, we have, for instance, links. We have hyperlinked all the laws, or the over 100 laws that I talked about. So if you want to access any of the law, you just click on the link, and then that quickly takes you to the exact official law. So that for instance, is important, and we thought that is crucial because then it enables us to get into the document and to get the official version of the law, because sometimes there's usually a lot of iteration as a law changes or is updated or is amended. Sometimes we find that we need to do that update. The online links that we have, so you can easily get, if you want to get the laws, the official version of the law, because sometimes you might find you're actually getting different version, which is not the official. The next bit is basically a summary of recommendations, but I think we can come to that towards the end on the high level view. We can go to the second, to the next bit. So the idea is that we divided the whole entire analysis into value chains, and that's what you can see on the screen, what we call the housing value chain, and it has got a number of parts. Obviously, in order to deliver housing, you need to begin with acquiring land. So the first value chain is what we call land assembly, and it also includes both assembling land, that is land acquiring land, land acquisition, and titling or registration, because you need to get land and have it registered as a landowner or as a property developer before you begin to put any structure on it. And the second value chain was on physical planning. So you need a lot of approvals, and in the document you're going actually to see there are several approvals, more than 20 approvals that you actually need even as a developer in order to deliver housing, and all those have time and costs as well. That is, they take resources both in terms of time as well as statutory fees that are charged. Then upon obtaining all the requisite approvals, then you move to construction. And we called it construction and maintenance phase, because over and above construction, you need other construction approvals and licenses, and there are institutions that regulate that space, but also the idea of maintaining buildings. And then finally, the last value chain, we called it finance, but it obviously involves a number of things. Here we talk about how do you get the funding, both on the demand side and as well as on the supply side. That is, the buyers or the off-takers, the persons who are buying that land, actually, those houses do need finance, as well as the developers who are putting those houses in the market also do need finance. And also there also taxation, there's also taxation on both ends of actors within the space. And of course, for instance, we know there's been quite some movement around financing, even especially on the demand side in recent times with the passage of the Finance Act 2023. So essentially, those are the different value chains that we do have. And now going to part 3 on the institutions involved in regulation or in delivery of housing. We also have many institutions. Many of them are ministries or state departments. And then we've got agencies or state parastatals that are under the different departments. And these are institutions that are charged. Of course, they vary in terms of their significance. Of course, some are very much involved, others are involved in setting policy, others are involved in providing approvals, others are involved in settling disputes like the judiciary, the land disputes tribunal, the environment and land court, and the rest. The others like county governments and their agencies provide those planning approvals and all that. And therefore, you're going to see that there are lots of institutions that are also involved. And these are the institutions that besides the law, that anyone playing in the space has to navigate. So essentially, if we go down to part 4, what you have is what we called overarching policies. So these are strictly, they are not specifically only applying to the housing sector, but these are laws and policies that are overarching, which means they apply to almost entirely every sector, but they touch also on housing. For instance, if you talk about the Constitution, the Affordable Housing Program, development guidelines that were developed because of the past administration's agenda on housing, the Big Four. And these are documents that continue to affect delivery of housing, and that which a player within the industry obviously needs to be aware of. The next bit is those are the value chains. I think we've talked about that. There's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The last, we have if you look at the last bit, Annex A, that is an annex of all the laws and policies once more. There's another annex on the regulations that we also have got. And of course, the details now of what these laws talk about is included. You'd have to read this report. It's rather large, but it's something that we can keep on talking about. So as I end, I think I could go back to the high-level recommendations, because we would enough. Each section, each value chain has its own recommendations that we have made, but we can go to the high-level recommendations that we have, and to have more as a takeaway. But of course, there's much, much more than that. And one of the things that we talk about is really fast-tracking the enactment of the housing bill. there was a housing bill that was being developed, which the initial draft came up in 2021. It's being pushed by the Ministry of Housing, but there hasn't been a lot of development since then. And what the housing bill in brief was seeking to provide is like a single, it was of course to replace the current Housing Act, but it was simply to provide like almost a single omnibus law that covers a lot of the things that we find scattered in different pieces of legislation at the moment, and including actually providing some institutions for regulating, because we've had even issues around developments sometimes not being delivered as they are, and a bit of regulation around that. The other thing is the National Building Code 2022, which has been in the works for a while. I think we are almost now towards the tail end of that, and supporting really now its adoption, its implementation, once it is in force. Of course, there's lots of capacity and a lot of things that actually introduces that would need support and implementation among us as partners. And the good thing is actually it also has provisions that actually support green housing or sustainable housing, which is what is consistent with the agenda of sustainable development. The other high-level recommendation is about simplifying both the process, the timeline, and the cost of approvals. I talked about when I was presenting that we have nearly almost 30, more than 20 approvals that are developer needs. How do we make it easier? How do we, even in collaboration with county governments, which are the ones that are mainly in that space, how do we make it, how do we automate it? How do we make it one-stop shop? How do we make it faster and quicker? Because so that then we are able to reduce costs and deliver affordable houses. And the next is really about aligning tax policies with the affordable housing agenda, because this then will drive long-term investments into housing. So we've had issues around that, for instance, on pension funds, because the pension-backed mortgages and developers, and also on the demand side, tapping into the pensions as in order to provide financing for that. So if you've got the right tax incentives, which are predictable over the long term, then that would obviously expedite on delivery of housing and the financing aspect, but we've already begun to see progress around that. And the last high-level recommendation is about supporting the collection and dissemination of data in the entire housing value chain. Because when you've got that disaggregated, that granular, that detailed data, then you're able to allow players to make coordinated investment decisions and to take risk. And therefore, by doing that, then you're able to enable them support. So especially for data then to inform demand, to inform where the housing would also be supplied, to inform what are the income levels. When you speak about affordable housing, how much can be afforded, and therefore tailor that towards ensuring that those houses are also taken up. But also at the same time, the developers who are putting those houses in the market, actually, it makes commercial sense for them to deal with that. So all these recommendations, these are just high level, but there are many around each housing value chain. And this is something that we can continue to engage in, and would very much welcome your views so that then we continue to enrich this document now and then. So that's the most I think I would say for now, and I'm sure we'll engage later towards the end in the Q&A. Thank you.
Maruyuki, thank you so much. I've recorded so far 2 questions. Maybe I can just ask them quickly now. Louisa Weddingham is asking, could we please have an update on the digitalization of the land registry? And then the second question from Gekonyo Gitonga, have you been able to review the housing levy, the legislation, and how it affects the affordable housing supply chain? Can I just intersect before you answer them, that these are exactly the questions that we would like you to put in this section here feedback where you send an email to Beatrice, and then we will start to record those questions and the evolving answers and how they get answered in the book in the space down here. So we're hoping to make this properly living, and you can decide if you want to ask your question anonymously or directly in person. Over to you, Mariuki.
Okay, thank you. In terms of the digitization of the land registries, this is something that has been ongoing. We do remember that this is a process or project that began actually even a number of years ago, even under different administrations, but then at some point that wasn't completed and then taken up once more. I do know that especially in Nairobi County, that's when where the process began. I think that's where there was a lot of concern because a lot of transactions happened in Nairobi County, and that is what actually at some point meant that there was a lot of a lag in terms of transactions, including, of course, the setting up of the SASA platform. It is not, it is functioning in terms of there are a number of transactions that you're able to do, but it's not fully working because there's a time there was even a moratorium on some of the things. The challenge, of course, has been the idea of digitizing was to convert the manual-based land records to digital. But of course, it has been a process that has, we could say, has taken longer than players would have wished. But I think it's something that is still ongoing. It isn't exactly complete, so that we say everything is functioning exactly as it was envisaged, or that all the land records are now digitized. But it's something that I think has progressed quite fast, especially within Nairobi County. I know it is being rolled in other counties, and hopefully this is something that would hope that in every land registry in the country that is possible, because then that will significantly quicken the turnaround time for those who are dealing in transacting in or land and housing. So, and then the next question around the housing levy, whether we reviewed that. As you certainly know, the housing, when we did the initial draft in November 2022, that was last year, we didn't have the Finance Act 2023. However, what we did have, what we had was something akin to this, because you remember initially there were regulations, and then they were quashed or they were struck down by court, and they had a semblance of this levy. But the current one of the housing levy that is now already being implemented starting July, we've not made that update, but it is something that obviously we will do because it is significant. But of course, in terms of the kind of impact it would have, we already see that analysis, because in the analysis we had covered an idea around, even if it was not called affordable housing levy, then there is that, but this is something that we would expect to have very, very soon on the document.
If I could add a couple of points to that, to the discussion. Firstly, as we've mentioned, we've launched an open access initiative with other members, including the other FSD entities, REAL, who's on the call with us, International Housing Solutions, and CAHF. And open access really talks about gathering the data on the product of the housing that's being delivered, the process, the performance, the people who live there, and then from that drawing out the practice, the 5 Ps. And Alan will talk about that more, but it would take time, I think, for us to capture that data, but we're very, very keen to work with government and private sector developers to start seeing the impact of the housing levy. But as you know, as has been done in other countries, typically you do need to fund this kind of housing fund to enable supply, because we have been caught in that circle of not having the funding to empower the developers. So it is a step in that direction, and we hope we will be able to capture some of that data going forward. Specifically on this Git book, I think many of you, will agree it can be very overwhelming even in this format. It was definitely overwhelming as the 200-page PDF we launched last year. So it's a huge step forward that you can navigate so easily. You could see how easy it is to navigate, but it really speaks to how long our value chain is and how complex it is. And this is another reason, that sharing the practice of all our work in the sector is very important, because it's only with that body of evidence can we move towards simplifying the sector. FSD will be keen to have a regular update of this. We're looking at how to do it feasibly, but it's something we're very committed to. So we'll look at, finding a resource that we can continue to update it and keep this as a public resource. So I'll also take, are there any more questions on this before we move to the other speaker?
There are, Sita, there are a couple. The one is relating to the Energy Act, and it's somebody from APG, and they're focused on providing affordable electricity to affordable housing. And I guess the answer to that is yes, the Energy Act is right here. There we go, Energy Act there. I don't know, Mariuki, if you want to add anything to that. And then another question from Daniel Mutama from the Livelihood Impact Fund. Have you ever considered areas that do not have land rights, especially in Kibera? And what is the legislation around that? I thought, Mariuki, maybe you might want to talk a little bit also about the case law function that we've got in here, which I found really interesting.
Yes, yeah, in terms of the Energy Act of 2019, together with the regulations, we also have got regulations. So what we do see, when you speak about energy, you're talking about there are two elements, especially energy, that is electricity, power, as well as water. So if you look at the Energy Act 2019, it has actually provisions that embed sustainability. For instance, they talk about the need to ensure that the buildings that we that are put up actually are able to conserve energy, they're able to conserve water, and in this sense, then they embed the sustainability I'm talking about. And so, and if you look at the section where we've analyzed the Energy Act as well as the regulations, you're going to see some of the actually things that that statute actually requires. And so for the partner who is actually within that space of energy sustainability in the housing sector, that is something that they can actually leverage on. It is, even when we speak about green housing, it is the whole area, including how then are you able to have houses that consume far less power or optimal energy for that purpose. In terms of areas where areas where land without title, especially within the informal settlements, in the informal areas. Yes, and if you look at the part, the value chain where we've spoken about land assembly and acquisition, because that's also a form of tenure, even within the areas where we do not strictly have title deeds. Actually, you'll notice that a significant part of this country is not just only in the informal settlements in urban areas, even many places in the rural areas and many other places where we have what we call a communal land tenure regime does not have title deeds. So in fact, I think in this country, the places which are titled in terms of geographical size are less than the ones that are untitled. And of course, we know for investor, they feel more comfortable when the security of tenure evidenced by a title deed to be able to put in significant resources in terms of investment. And so that is why, of course, even a program like titling, which we know the government in the last 10 or so years has been aggressively doing, having issued several millions of titles is actually something that is very important and that has to keep on going on to make sure that it gives this level of comfort to investors in terms of enhancing security of tenure and promoting investment. That is the supply of housing, and even for demand. If you are purchasing a house, you'd want to be sure that you've got a title deed. But having said that, still, we have other kind of regimes that also try and provide a bit of comfort as well. For instance, we have what we call special planning areas, even places like, I think, Mukuru and somewhere else within Nairobi in the informal settlements. And therefore, there's also some other mechanism through which there would be that kind of security of tenure provided even in the intervening period where title deeds have not yet been issued. Thank you.
Thank you. I see lots of other questions in the chat. In view of time, we will make our best effort to answer them properly. We will answer them, but with our knowledge base by email. But this is exactly the kind of dialogue we're so excited to have. So if I could request that we move to the second speaker, and that is Beatrice Mwangi from CAHF, who has helped to develop a Nairobi Metropolitan Area database. Beatrice?
Thanks, Sita. Just going to proceed and share my screen. It's taking a minute.
No problem. I could just give a couple of comments. So when FSD's program was launched in 2020, I mentioned the strategy and the research we did to lead up to the strategy. And we clearly saw that there are 4 different housing segments in Kenya, starting with the incremental segment, that's the largest, the informal settlements, which are also very big. Then we categorized an urban rental segment because we see how predominant rental is in the urban areas, and then the formal for sale. So FSD works with partners in all these 4 housing segments to create, to pilot and create market-making solutions to improve the access to housing and working on the financial infrastructure. Our project is designed around having an enabling ecosystem component where we're working to improve the broader ecosystem. And so a lot of what we're sharing today is around that. It's not the financial product innovation or really looking at green and resilient housing, but the overarching envelope of enabling ecosystem. Beatrice, you're good? We'll hand it over to Beatrice. Thank you.
I'm good, Sita. Thank you. I hope you can see my screen. To introduce myself, my name is Beatrice Mwangi. I work for the Center for Affordable Housing Finance as a research manager, mainly focusing on Kenya. I'll take you through a presentation, a very few slides on the dashboard itself, and then we'll go into the dashboard and just do a demonstration on how it works. There's a link here that allows you to access the dashboard. So whenever you get the presentation, kindly use that link to access the dashboard. And just to introduce why the dashboard and why we had to work on it, just looking at the data landscape within the Nairobi Metropolitan Area, you notice that housing supply data is very scanty. We've, for such a long time, worked with the same numbers of 200,000 housing units as the housing deficit every year. I don't think there's anyone who could actually provide the data to back those statistics. And that means there's lack of data consolidation within the market, not only within the metropolitan area, but within the entire country. And this is because data sits with different custodians. So property developers have data on the houses they're producing, property managers have data, other individual institutions have data, but there's not been any initiative to put that data together. So everyone just works with whatever data they have. And for us trying to work on research, then there's a lot of unavailability of useful data. It's either it can't be verified or it is very inconsistent, and that makes it very difficult to come up with useful recommendations for the housing sector. So just to resolve that overall unavailability of data, CAHF, in collaboration with FSD Kenya and FSD Africa Investments, came together and worked on this dashboard that I'm going to present today, which is one part of the open access initiative, which Alan will touch on later. And it aims just to harness all the data and bring it together and try and make useful outputs out of it, and share that with all the practitioners. So we are targeting the academia, we are targeting developers, property managers, and also investors. And anyone who needs to access the data is able to access it. We have done the data collection just within the Nairobi Metropolitan Area, but that's just a start. And we hope to be able to improve on the work and probably cover Kenya as a country at the end of it all. So far, we've been able to collect data over 2 years. So last year, that's 2022, and the previous year, 2021. So far, we have been able to have data for over 1,000 housing projects, and these are around 30,000 housing units and beyond. They only covered 4 counties. So within the metropolitan area, we all understand it has 5 counties, but we've covered 4. And we've left out Murang'a, and mainly because it's agriculturally, it operates as an agricultural area mainly, and most of the houses are self-built. So we don't have really institutional data in that area. So the others that we've covered is Kiambu County, Kajiado, Nairobi, and Machakos. So that's what we will go through. How did we collect the data over those 2 previous years that we've collected? We've either drawn that data from developer websites, or from brochures that are shared at forums and conferences. And we've also had some interviews with developers themselves, some property managers, and also other institutions that are custodians of data. We've been able to put together a template where we put that data, and the exercise so far has resulted to so many gaps, showing that some of the custodians of data still either don't track the data that they have, or they're not willing to share, which has made putting together the dashboard quite a task. But we're glad we're able to put out something that is significant and helpful to the market. We've been able to put all that data on a dashboard through the Tableau platform. So this is an interactive platform that allows you to explore whatever data is there and also get graphical illustrations for better understanding of the housing market within the Nairobi Metropolitan Area. So this is a snippet of how the dashboard looks like. We will go into it later on, but just to take you through how it's structured. At the top here, we have the filters. So you're able to pick whatever data you're looking for. So in terms of the year collected, as I've mentioned, we've covered only 2 years. That's 2021, 2022. The intention is to make it cumulative and collect the data annually, which helps us really show a good trend and just how the housing supply has been growing. You're also able to filter in terms of location. And this, we have used the neighborhoods that we have. We've not really based it on administrative boundaries. We just use the neighborhoods that we have, and you're able to filter that out as well. We also have the option to filter through project status. So most of the projects are either complete, it's either ongoing, they're planned, or they're stalled. For some, they've not commenced, which means they're probably launched and are just waiting to get started. So they're in between there. We also have the option to filter by unit type. And here we're looking at the number of bedrooms. So are you looking for studios? Are you looking for 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, or 4 or 5? So we've stopped at 5 bedroom for now. And then in terms of types of development, then that depends on whether the apartments, are you looking for townhouses? Are you looking for villas? So it allows you to filter with that. In terms of developer model, this is either the rent, or is it units for sale, or is it for both? So you're able to pick on that There's also the option to filter out the property management model. So is it managed by the developer, an external property manager, or just the landlord themselves? And goes on and on. As we explore the dashboard, you'll be able to see that. We also mention on the source of water. So is it borehole? Is it the county council water? We mention or are able to filter data on the waste disposal mechanism. Do they have water recycling or not? And what if they have solar energy sources or not? And the last row of filters, we're also able to identify government-supported projects and those that are not. For the government-supported projects, we mainly highlighted those that are on Boma Yangu. So you're able to either pick and just check on those or on the entire list. The other thing you're able to, give me a minute, sorry. So the other thing you're able to check or to filter with is the unit prices. So you can give a range of which units you're trying to target from what price to what price. And you're also able to search for the project depending on the developer. An interesting thing about this dashboard, you're able to have two views, either a developer view or a buyer's view. So you'll note that with the developer view, you can search by developer, but when you're having a buyer view, you're able to search the project by the project name. This icon here allows you to reset the filters. So after you probably made changes to it, you're able to reset and either get new filters or just go to the default. The image right below here just shows you how the dashboard looks on default. So this is we've had 1,037 projects. This number is complete. This number is ongoing, and the planned ones, the stalled ones, and the not yet complete. And for those that we don't have data on, you're not able to verify, then those are also highlighted. These bubbles on your left just show the distribution of the units in terms of typology. So how many of these units are 2-bedroom, how many are 3-bedroom, how many are 1-bedroom, how many are studios, etc. And then we have a map here that shows the exact Google location of that project. So you're able to hover around one of the small dots there, know what project that is, and just get a little bit more details on it. Just going to try to move to the next slide. Sorry. So below that part, you're also able to find charts that just analyze the data that you already have. We have two types of charts that we provide. So either select the chart by the unit type. This is either by the number of bedrooms. So we have a range from studios to 5 bedrooms. And you're also able to select a chart by the development type. That is either apartments. We've put together bungalows and villas, townhouses and maisonettes are put together. And we are able to provide these definitions in a definitions note that's available on the website as well, just to help you understand which ones we refer to when we say they're villas or bungalows and apartments and also townhouses, just to show that difference. We understand that those words are used quite differently across the market. So we've tried to provide definitions for that. Below those graphs, then you're able to get a table that gives you a little bit more detail on the project that we have. And this table only shows the median units within a certain area. So you either because you selected a certain area that you wanted to get data on, or you selected a certain project, then you get the units, the median units. We're not able to provide details on all the units, otherwise you'll be very clustered and you're not able to see. Below here, I've just provided a list of what graphs we provide or what illustrations we show. So selecting the chart by unit type, you're able to tell the median rents per square meter, the average prices, the service charge, the total units, the mortgage to rent ratio, mortgage installments, the monthly rent, or even the rental yield. If you select the charts by development type, then you're also able to get an illustration of the median mortgage installments, and you've provided assumptions for how we got that installment. You're also able to get data on service charge, on the rent per development, that's the median rent, or the rent per square meter, the price per square meter, total units, and also the average mortgage installment, given the specific mortgage terms that are provided. At the very bottom of that dashboard, we provide an option for comments. We are very cognizant of the fact that data is very scanty, and how we collected the data is very prone to error. For example, if we got the data from websites, it's probably not very up to date, or interviews and we didn't get the right data. So we really welcome everyone who interacts with the dashboard, one, to really let us know how user-friendly it is by giving feedback at the very bottom of that dashboard, and also just give feedback on the data quality. If there's any additional data that one has, we're really happy to receive it and incorporate it into the dashboard. So what's next for this exercise? We aim to continuously improve on the data quality. We're currently pursuing a partnership with KPDA to be able to obtain more data, especially from their members who are mainly developers and the main custodians of data. We will be updating the data annually, covering as many neighborhoods as possible and as many projects as data is available for. And we welcome all data custodians, especially developers and property managers, in the spirit of open access, to kindly share the data that they have, which not only markets their projects when we provide them on this dashboard, but also allows more informed decision-making in the housing market. Again, just to emphasize on the data validation process, we really welcome all data custodians to embrace this process and be part of it, and just help us refine this data so that it's useful for the housing market in Kenya. I'll now take us to the actual dashboards.
While Beatrice pulls up the dashboard, I think we need to commend all the working parents for, yeah. COVID's shown us a new style of working, which I think is quite effective. So just to commend that.
There's some nice questions on the chat, just relating to other access to data sources and working with estate agents. And we're very keen that this becomes a platform where everyone feels that they can make sure that their project is represented. In the long run, we'd also quite like to be able to provide the links to the developers, unless Beatrice, I don't know if that's there yet, you can show us perhaps. So that if you're a developer and you want your website represented, it would be included within the project profile that's provided in the dashboard. The one other comment, Beatrice, maybe you can make in as you present the dashboard and show people around is about the heaviness of the data. So sometimes refreshing the screen takes some time. You might want to just show that.
Thanks, Casey and Sita. So this is where the dashboard sits on the CAHF website. We just have a little introduction to it, and then the dashboard itself, just skim through quickly, and then we go into the details of it. So this is the dashboard itself, and the comment section I was talking about, where you can leave a comment. So just to start us off, this is just a little introduction on the dashboard again, and we provide links to our partners, that is FSD Kenya and FSD Africa Investment. We also provide access to relevant documents that allow one to interact with the dashboard easily. So we have a user guide, we have a definitions document, and we also have an illustration of how to use the dashboard. So This really shows how to use the dashboard. If you click on the link that leads to this, then you're able to know exactly what icon is useful for you to be able to navigate through the whole dashboard. We also have the definitions notes, which helps you understand what data points we're referring to across the entire list. So this is also accessible to you through the links provided on the website. So going to the exact dashboard, this is how it looks on the website. We're currently looking at the developer view, and you can always switch to the buyer view. And there's no really significant difference in how the two are structured. The only difference comes to when we come into the graphs and the charts that we provide at the bottom. So we've tried to tailor those to what works or what is most relevant for developers and what is most relevant for buyer. And just to illustrate how it works, so as I mentioned, we've collected the data over 2 years, 2021 and 2022. And I'll just show you how it works. We can select 2022 and apply, which allows, which then filters the data. As you'll notice, it's quite slow. As Casey has mentioned, it's a lot of data and can really make the dashboard a little bit slow, but it's super effective. These are all the neighborhoods that we've tried to cover, around 34 of them within the Nairobi Metropolitan Area. This is the entire list. And you can always pick the neighborhood you want to look at. So this is the entire list, and just highlight one of the areas and we look at the data available there. So I'll pick on Raqqa. Again, you need to click on apply to be able to make that selection. As you can see, as you make the selections, it filters the projects that are available. So we've picked 2022 Raqqa. You can see the total number of projects we've been able to cover for this area, 20, 18 of which are complete, 1 is ongoing and 1 is stalled. In terms of the units available, you'll notice there are 2-bedroom units. Here we have just a breakdown of the units that are available. There's 1 bedroom, the 4 bedrooms, and there are 3-bedroom units. If you hover around, then you're able to get a little bit more detail on those units. And on the right side here, you're able to tell where they're located. So you can either zoom in or out just to be able to see the map better. So as a large country, you can make it, zoom it out a little bit, you're able to get the exact location of those projects. And when you hover around, you'll notice that we've provided a bit more data on the projects. So we aim to give the project name, who's the developer, where is it located, the number of units, include the property website where you can find that data, and also be able to find the Google coordinates of that project. Coming down here, then you get, this is where we have the charts. So this is a chart by development type. So here we're only looking at apartments in Raqqa. We didn't cover any other typology within that area. So we're only able to see the details for the apartments. And these are the median rental yield. So this shows you, according to the data we have, 1-bedroom units had the highest yield at 5.7%, 4-bedroom units at 4.1%, and the lowest was 3-bedroom at 4%. So if you're looking to probably get more information probably on the mortgage installment, then you would just change the chart and you're able to get this illustration depending on the typology of units that are available. So I mentioned earlier, we provide details on service charge, on the rent per square meter, price per square meter, the breakdown of the units, and the mortgage installment. That's by development type. And when you look at, if you would rather make selection by the unit type, you're also able to get all that, all the details there. Should you want to probably print out this page, just for future reference or to share it with someone, you just need to download it as a PDF. There's an icon here that allows you to download the data. You can either download this entire page as it is, or you can pick a section of it. So probably want to just get the bubbles, you're able to pick just that, or the entire page. This icon here that has an envelope allows you to write an email to Beatrice. So I'm Beatrice, and I'll be able to share with you the raw data that went into this dashboard. So you could, this prompt takes you to an email. You can request for the data for 2022 or 2021 or both data sets, and we are able to share that in Excel. The data that we have in Excel is more detailed than what we have on the dashboard. So that's useful if you're trying to do more in-depth analysis.
Beatrice, I think in view of time, I'm requesting you to start wrapping up, and maybe we'll take just one or two questions before moving to the next speaker. From the chat, it's so clear what the need for this is. But I want to reiterate what Beatrice and Kessia said with all humility. This is a data collection exercise, and we've relied on people to collect data for us. And there may be errors, and we welcome these errors. If you notice anything, let us know. If you want to share more information, also let us know. This is another live tool we'd like to bring. One other point I want to make is on the yields. We all often feel that we get very high yields in housing, but this kind of tool can show that the yields in formally delivered housing may not be as high as we see in single landlord units, or less, more under the radar developments, etc. So we're really just trying to bring the transparency to what the market realities are. I've seen a question to ask for similar information in informal settlements. I think, we cannot, I think we're all in this room because of our desire to improve the conditions there. And so we should potentially think about a parallel effort to collect more information in informal settlements. But this was very much driven to what are the realities of formally delivered housing, because even that in itself is being quite challenging, linking to what we learned from Muriuki, that it's a very long value chain. So Beatrice, I'll give you a couple of minutes to wrap up, and maybe Kessia can help us take a couple of questions.
Thanks, Sita. I'll just briefly walk us through the buyer view, which I had mentioned is not any different. So the only difference is here at the bottom here where you have the chart. And we figured what would be most important for a buyer is probably the rent and the mortgage installments. So that's the data that's the illustration that we're able to provide in the charts below here. But we'll keep improving on the work and just seeing what more data would be useful and keep growing the dashboard. But that's how it's looking for now. Just to remind us to just leave a comment, especially on the quality of data and usability, so we are able to keep improving the work. Yeah, that's it for the dashboard. It's available on the CAHF website, and kindly feel free to request for the data should you need it. Thank you.
Thank you, Beatrice.
Sita, there are such lovely comments, and I think that we're going to write to everybody who's participating in this with details on accessing the website and the dashboard, and how to participate in it, how to add their own data to it, and so on. So we'll send that out after the webinar. I think it's okay to carry on at this point.
Okay. So with that, thank you again, Beatrice. This has been a labor of love, I think, for the whole team. I would ask Alan. Alan has joined CAHF to lead the Open Access Initiative. So Alan, over to you, please. And just to tell all our attendees how grateful we are you're here. I can see so many familiar names and new names from government, from DFIs, from other stakeholders who are really working in the housing ecosystem. So thank you for giving us the time today. And today's just presenting the tools as we've developed them. We've had engagement with some of you along the way as we've developed them, but it's really an ongoing conversation. Thank you. Alan, if I can request you try to limit to 10 minutes so we have some time to wrap up.
Yeah, sure thing, Sita. Thanks, Sita. And thank you, Morioki and Beatrice, too, for your sessions. I think, reflecting on those sessions, a persistent theme in one form or another has been data. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alan Motuma, and I look after the Open Access Initiative at CAHF. And I am glad to be presenting to you the Housing Development Cost Benchmark Report for Kenya that was done in the year 2022, but finalized this year. So really, the starting point of this presentation is that data is fundamental to investment decisions. And here we are talking about good quality forecast data, which, as has been mentioned by the previous speakers, it's often difficult to come by when it comes to housing, but it's still important for us to get an accurate picture when we use that data, an accurate picture of the affordable housing investment opportunities, and more importantly, the risks. And so what we did under the Open Access Initiative is that we developed a framework that helps us to collect and analyze this data with specific focus on the data that's held by the private sector players. Because when you look at the business cases and the board presentations that we often develop as investors and developers, they are concerned about these 5 Ps, and Sita alluded to them earlier. The first P is a product that we want to develop. So this has to do with the typologies, whether they're single dwelling units or apartment blocks, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, and the associated costs. The second P has to do with the process in terms of how do we develop these particular products? What are the steps? What is the time we take, and what is the cost associated with that? And we all know that these have implications on the bottom lines, because the longer we take in delivering or building these particular products, the more it hurts the returns that we want to achieve. The third P has to do with people. Who are we building for? Who will buy or rent these products, and what are their unique housing needs, and whether they'll be able to afford, whether it's purchasing or renting these units, and for how long. The fourth P has to do with performance, which is perhaps the most important P for the private sector players in this room, because that's a question we get asked by our shareholders. What's the performance of this investment, and does it meet the return expectations? And then finally, the fifth P is a practice pillar, which has to do with being able to analyze what the experience has been in the delivery process and the best way to do things, and the opportunities that we can be able to get for cost savings through applications, so that we don't have to learn from other people, so that we can be able to learn from other people's mistakes. And really, that is where the Open Access Initiative comes in. It is championed by CAHF and by other like-minded investors, such as FSD Africa Investments, Real, FSDK, and International Housing Solutions. And the purpose really of open access is, as mentioned earlier, it's a market systems intervention that seeks to address the information asymmetry, the opacity in the market. And it seeks to do this by harnessing the collective experiences and learnings produced by investors through the investments into affordable housing process. So what we are saying is that during the journey of investments for the private sector, you generate quite a bit of data from the board presentations, the feasibility studies, and the financial models that you perhaps come up with. And we're saying that this information, if it is taken together at an aggregate level, can be able to reduce the opacity that exists in the market. And by doing so, then the Open Access Initiative is able to offer benchmarking data and reference points that would be very useful for all market participants. And one such market reference point is the development cost benchmark that I'm going to take us through in the next couple of slides. But aside from this particular output, Open Access has generated a number of other outputs. The ones that I'd highlight is a practice note that shares the experience of International Housing Solutions in Kenya. And that particular practice note delves into the reasons for injecting project proposals into the Kenyan fund. We've also published a tenant purchase scheme report on Kenya and several other outputs that you can be able to access on the CAHF website. But for the purpose of this presentation, I'll focus on the Housing Development Cost Benchmark Report. And even as I get into it, I think it's first important to say what it is. And it is an analytical tool that should help us unpack what the typical development costs of various types of housing products entail. And I think we can all agree that, half the time when it comes to delivering projects, sometimes we're flying blind because it's difficult to be able to assess the cost of development within these projects. What we usually have from a market perspective is the price of the products that are being developed. We often don't have cost data that is available, and the price data obscures the development costs and doesn't really say whether there are obvious costs or hidden, whether they're cash costs or in-kind costs, whether projects have subsidies or don't have subsidies applied to it. So really the Development Cost Benchmark Report is a starting point to help stakeholders improve their awareness and understanding of the real development costs and the cost drivers therein when it comes to delivery. So I'll take us through the methodology that we used for the report. Bearing in mind that this is a benchmark study, the ideal way to have gone about it would have been to aggregate all the information from as many market players as possible. But outside of this micro level data being available, what we then did is we developed a bill of quantities on 3 unit typologies that I'm going to take us through. And then we filled in the BOQ with information from a variety of sources. So the sources included desktop surveys from different developers, contractors. We're able to get material suppliers to also share the information with us, and more importantly, professionals within this space to share the information. We also were able to look at different cost surveys that have been done within the local property market. And I will put the caveat that most of these cost surveys were very general, so they didn't go into the specific, but we were still able to use the information that was given there. We also held a number of interviews and workshops with professionals within this space to be able to fill in these BQs. And this was with respect to the construction costs and the development costs. For the land costs and other development costs, so that this would be the approval fees, the consultant fees, marketing, etc. We primarily use desktop survey data to be able to fill those in, with a couple of interviews done to just validate that kind of information. So once we collected the information, we had to go through a process of data validation, just to ensure that what we were getting in terms of sources of data aligned to what the market expectation was. And we did this by testing it out with the investors who are participating in the open access initiative. And as an aside, it's important for me to say that we have 10 Kenyan developers who are voluntarily and formally signed on to the open access initiative. And we will be happy to engage you should you be willing to participate within this initiative. So we went through that particular process, and it was insightful to give us a reference point in terms of how our data stacked vis-a-vis the experiences. So when it comes to the specific unit typologies that we selected to benchmark, we chose 3 different typologies. The first being a 55 square meter house that is in a single dwelling configuration, meaning that it is built on its own plot of land. Then the other 2 developments or 2 typologies, were 2-bedroom apartment typologies. One of them being in a low-rise and low-density development plan, while the other being in a high-density and high-rise development plan. So the question you might ask is, why these particular typologies? And the short answer to it is we were conceptualizing them as the ideal mid-tier or median typology unit, especially from a family setting. A studio and a bed sitter, or a studio and a 1-bedroom unit would be too small, and a 3-bedroom unit would also be considered as like an upper to mid-range sort of unit. So a 2-bedroom unit made sense for us. So suffice it to say, the slide shows the specific aspects that we made in terms of the assumption to enable us to get to a benchmark output. I won't go through the individual assumptions made, but I will make mention of the design efficiency factors. So we're assuming the ranges between 81 to 25%. And then the only other one that I would want to point out is the infrastructure assumptions that we made, because they're going to play out in the cost elements. So for the single dwelling units, we assumed that each unit would have its own borehole and storage tank, as well as a septic and soakaway drain. The assumption being that if you're building one unit by itself, you need to provide these particular infrastructure services. While for the rest, of course, the borehole and storage tanks and the sanitation sort of infra specs were then going to be shared across all the other units. For the apartment block, I think the difference between that and the single dwelling unit is a provision of the transformer on site. I guess those of us in this market know that for you to get grid connection from KPLC, for anything above 30 units, you need to have a transformer on site. So getting into the real heart of the report, in terms of the numbers, and those of you who are developers and investors, I guess this is what you're looking forward to. And what we found was that the cost of developing a two-bed unit on a standalone basis came to about 4 million shillings at a square meter cost of about 71,000 shillings, 71,800. And at this point, it's important for me to note that the cost per square meter being shown is on a gross lettable area basis. So it accounts for efficiency and not the gross built up area basis. And it's also important for me to remind us that we're looking at development costs. So it's not construction costs. So these are the all-in delivery costs of a house. So it includes land, infra, construction, etc. For the low density two-bedroom unit, the total development cost came to about 3 million shillings per square meter. Sorry, 3 million shillings for the whole unit, and that translates to a square meter cost of about 68,000 shillings. While for the high density two-bedroom unit, it wasn't that different. There's a slight difference of about 200,000 shillings at 3.2 million shillings, and a square meter cost of 74,000 shillings. So that's shown on the table on the left, and the graph on the right tries to show a relative comparison of costs between the different technology of units. I will make mention that the question you might ask is, why is there a significant price difference between the single dwelling unit and the apartment units? It is primarily driven by the robust assumptions we made on the provision of infra, that each house will have its own borehole and storage tank. Of course, in practice, that might not be the case, but we thought it would be just wise to make that kind of assumptions, and we're happy for you to be able to give us what your experience has been. So in terms of the insights you can get from the graph, I've mentioned the infra cost for the single dwelling unit. It's about 30% of the total development cost, while for the apartment blocks, it ranges between 8 to 10%. The second insight is that the approval and compliance costs, as well as the marketing costs and other soft development costs, were similar across all unit typologies. So no surprises there. But the third insight, which of course stands to reason, is that the construction cost element was then the most significant chunk of development costs. For the single dwelling unit, it's about 46% of construction costs, which translates to a per square meter cost of about 33,000 shillings, while for the apartment block, it ranges between 57 to 58%. And on a per square meter basis, that's about 38K to 42K. And it tracks well because structurally a bungalow would be cheaper to build than an apartment block. Again, of course, if there are any questions regarding the specific shilling numbers, this references the 2022 prices and does not account for the significant cost variations that have happened between the beginning of the year and now. The only other thing that I would want to point out is the financing costs. They range between 12 to 15%. The assumptions made here was that there was a 50-50 split between equity and debt in terms of the financing of these particular developments. So I guess the question for us in the webinar is, how does this information align with your experiences? Is it tracking well? Is it above? Is it below? And, as I conclude, I guess the point is it's a call to action for us in this particular space, because we need to go deeper in understanding the line-by-line items that build up the costs. So we were able to come up with a BQ and we filled them out. And majority of us have that process, but that information is stored privately. And we want to be able to access that information and do a comparison with this particular benchmark report, because we've only scratched the surface of what's possible. And we also need to create more market reference points from a land perspective, from an infra cost perspective, because the market we operate in is quite opaque. And such benchmarks would be, usually useful to serve as reference points. But I guess we have to be willing to share. And the principle of open access is that we do not intend to interfere with the competitive landscape of the market, but instead we want to nurture it. And we want to foster healthy competition that allows investors and developers to operate in greater efficiency. And in my last sort of line is that, the philosophy of open access is that if we compete in terms of how we access data rather than how we use it, then we end up wasting resources. If we're replicating feasibility studies across 10 different developers, then we're really wasting resources. And then what we can do if we crowd this information is be able to save those resources and apply them towards the delivery of housing. So I'm not sure whether there are any questions that we would want to address because of time. I'd just like to hand over the button back to,
what I would suggest actually is we move on. You've got a great article on the CAHF website. If we have a couple of minutes, if people want to stay on after 4:30, maybe we can take some questions then. But thank you for the presentation. And just to reiterate what Alan said, in all our work with all our partners, we're building in the principles of open access. So an example is with KPDA, and State Department, we are supporting 12 developers to get access to the tax credits, the VAT tax credits that are given to support the affordable housing agenda. But the first step of that was all the developers that KPDA will support sign up to open access. At least we know, we're able to say this is the cost of infrastructure, this is the cost of construction, because the numbers are so far away from what they need to be. Our costs are so much higher than what they need to be. And we're trying to even show that the profits are actually from our limited data that we've got and through open access and years of data before open access, this profit's actually much less for housing developers than you expect because of the complex nature and how long it takes. So with those comments, I want to quickly do a presentation on behalf of two of my colleagues who couldn't be here. Lukania with FSD, she's our research lead, and Tabitha Mwangi with KNBS, and it's about FinAccess. So I'll just quickly share my screen and tell you a little bit about this survey that's been done since 2006. We're actually hosting another workshop with KNBS today, so neither of them could present. But the reason it's so important to talk about it is we find that there is rich data that's been available, but that's been little consumed. So it's really just to showcase what's available. Is my screen showing?
Yes, it is. Okay.
Yeah, I'm still having the same issue.
So you could go to slideshow. Slideshow and then from beginning.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, great. So as I said, FinAccess is a nationally representative household-based survey that provides information of the financial lives of Kenyans, looking at how they interact with the financial system. FinAccess has been conducted regularly since 2006 as a joint partnership between KNBS, the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, CBK, Central Bank of Kenya, and FSD Kenya. And this is a snapshot of all the sponsors and partners who helped us with the most recent FinAccess in 2021. So what FinAccess has shown is that our financial, the access has improved. I think that's undeniable, and the numbers show that. What we're trying to go deeper into now is, does access mean financial health? And that's really where we need to focus on. Do households have the ability to overcome any shocks, either due to the cost of living or any health issues or even climate issues that we see. And that's where we're really focusing our efforts on now. What I'd really like to emphasize is how much data is available on FinAccess. So I've got all the links to this at the end, and this will be shared. But from FinAccess 2021, there's a report, the highlights, the questionnaire, and they're also anonymized weighted data sets. So this is this is showing all the households in FinAccess 2021. There were 30,600 households enumerated by 1,700 enumerators around the country. It was the first time FinAccess was conducted at a county level, and KNBS did the sampling framework to ensure that the number of houses sampled in each county made it representative to that county. And so that's all available online. I took a little snapshot of the anonymized data that you can even download on Excel and compare it to all the questions in the FinAccess questionnaire to see if it can help you get some of the insights you want for the demand for the housing population. And then what we did in 2021 and before that in 2019 is to work with 71.4 to get a housing lens perspective of the FinAccess data. And this is available on our website, the whole housing analysis. I've just taken a few snapshots. So for example, here, this is showing us that the majority of housing was, sorry, just a second. The majority of individuals inherit the properties they own. Buying materials incrementally is the next most common option. So I think this really speaks to the 4 housing segments that FSD has defined, and needing to support the incremental segment as much as we support the urban for sale or urban rental segment is critical. Forward. Sorry, I'm having the same challenge. Oh, here we go. We also looked at the use of durable materials, as we expect this is pretty low, especially in rural areas, except for the roof. And there can be so many policy implications on this. One is the way to support the floors, which are made from non-durable materials, to have, better resilience, particularly in line of climate change, or is there something that can be done for the roofing materials to be slightly cheaper with the right tax incentive? And then we looked at all the access to utilities from water, sanitation, and energy. And here we can see that, as expected, that there is some prevalence of flush toilets, mainly in the urban employed, but largely sanitation is provided through pit latrines. And what can the ecosystem do just to support, to make sure that pit latrines are better located depending on soil topography, the safety measures are there, and even how can the waste be treated so it's better for the environment, can support any agriculture, etc. So these are all the links to what I've shared. And both KNBS, FSD, and CBK, we have an open request. We're going to start planning for the June 2024 FinAccess in late October. If you have any interest to be involved or you'd like to give any feedback after going through these materials, please do reach out to Tabitha or Lucania at these emails. But it's a very, very powerful survey that we've been running. So I'll stop the share. Okay, I thought I was going fast, but we're already 1 minute to the hour. So I'm going to allow Kessia to just mention the MOOC. And if people want to stay on for a few minutes, please do. We will take questions. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sita. There's so many lovely conversations that are happening in the chats and in the Q&A boxes, and I promise we will collect them and we will respond so that we can really share as widely to your interest. I'm going to share my screen now to show you we've just launched. We're so excited about this. We've just launched a massive open online course. So like Coursera or edX, specifically focusing on making housing markets work in African cities, the role and opportunity of finance. It's a 6-week course. It has 6 modules in it. And those modules, across the 6 modules, there are over 50 videos, lots of written material, and then there's also short assessments that you have to undertake, and at the end you get a certificate. And if you post it on LinkedIn, we will celebrate and clap for you. But we really hope that it becomes a nice space for colleagues to engage around the questions, like the theoretical framework that underpins the work that we all do. And we'd really love you to share it also with academics. And if they want to offer it as part of their course program, then we would be very happy to do live Q&As on specific sessions. So to get to it, Housing Finance Africa, you go to our projects page and then choose the first project, Making Housing Markets Work in African Cities. And then you can go down and click on this link and you can sign up. We were supported by the African Cities Lab, and we worked in partnership with the University of Cape Town and their Urban Real Estate Research Unit, with Hofinet, and I know that Maria is on the call here, with the African Union for Housing Finance, and with the International Housing Studies Program at Erasmus University. If you go to the actual website, this is what you see. And I just want to show you a couple of the lectures focused specifically on Kenya. So here we have in video 3 of module 5, Beatrice talking about housing submarkets in Kenya. And if that gets started, it takes you in and you can see, can you hear the sound of the show? Is it only coming into my ears?
Hello, my name is Beatrice Mwangi. I'm going to discuss housing submarkets in Kenya. Kenya has an estimated annual supply of 50.
So that's basically what's available. Another lecture on there has Sita. Sita talks about blockages along the housing value chain. We've translated all of the videos also into French and provided subtitles for that. There are some videos in French where we've translated and put it into English. So we would love it if you and your colleagues sign up and take the course. There have been a few people who've already finished. We launched it about a month ago. It covers information in Rwanda, in South Africa, in, I think, some case studies from Cote d'Ivoire and Senegal and Cameroon, and of course from Kenya and Uganda as well. So we would just be very happy if you would take the course, and I'd love to hear from you if you think it is useful. I'll stop there, and if that was too fast, just send us an email and we'll send you all the details.
Thank you, Cassie, and thank you to all the panelists. I just want to try to get a sense. Should we keep it open for a couple of questions, or are there any burning ones in the chat? I haven't been monitoring that.
Okay, in the chat, let's see. Lots of notes just saying people are very happy with what they're seeing. Some good comments about how are we engaging in green. I was delighted, Sita, by so many of the technical questions that are being asked, because in fact, I think the thing that you and I are always trying to push for is, well, let's get to the actual detail. And that's happened in this chat, but it means that we've got a lot of homework to respond properly to that. I wish we could have the proper conversation with everyone, but this format doesn't allow it. There's someone here, Mariyuki, who's commented on the regulatory review. Kindly update on the status of the draft National Building Code 2022. So we will do that right away. There are questions about alternative building materials, which I know something, Sita, that you've been looking at, and also maybe you should put into the chat the link to your Jenga Green Library. So there are a number of questions that are looking at that. What kinds of materials are people using and so on? That gets a bit broader than the conversation we wanted here. On your presentation, someone said that the data on inheritance looks interesting and encouraging. And are there further demographics in terms of who property passes on to, in terms of gender and age? Before you answer that, I can say that as part of our yearbook process, we've also asked that question. And we can send you that for Kenya, because we asked every single author across the continent to answer that very specific question. And so we'd be very happy to share that with you. The report, Sita, that you presented on FinAccess, I don't know if the link has been put into the chat. Lots of people are asking about that. We will send you a whole bibliography of everything that's here and also what we weren't able to discuss further. I think that's about it. Some technical questions, Alan, on your presentation in terms of the contents of the analysis and the benchmarking, the different buildings, and the specifications that lead to cost differentials. I think I'm going to stop there. And then one last comment that I have to say is that as the Secretariat to the African Union for Housing Finance, of which CETA through FSD Kenya is a member, we are hosting a conference at the end of next month, from the 31st of October, in Windhoek, Namibia, and the link to that has been put on the screen as well. Anything else, Sita? We covered it all.
No,
here.
I think not. I think it would need a bit more time to engage with the detailed questions.
Yeah.
Which we will do. I think this webinar was long in the making. We were, but there will be another one soon. And we will follow up with all the questions. I know there's also going to be a KMRC conference. They have one every year. So there are lots of opportunities to keep engaging. But the last thing I'd like to end with is exactly what Alan said, that there's the reason affordable housing is hard is it's hard for the market to provide it. And that's because of, the cost of delivery is not really recoverable from what you can get back. So the more that we share of our experiences, because I don't think we're going to unearth, huge amounts of profit or anything. We're just going to build a better collaboration of trying to overcome this market failure in a way. And we really do appreciate that affordable housing is one of the flagship of the government, and how much work is happening there, and what we as a sector, from both public sector, private sector, etc., can continue to work together to help to move the needle incrementally. So I think with that, I will say goodbye to everyone, and a big thank you for your encouragement. We are tasking you to please take some time, go through it, and give us your feedback once you've had a chance to go through the different tools. So we continue to improve on them and think of other ways to use them or other tools to work with. So thank you to all the panelists. Thank you to CAHF for all the work they've done over the last 2 years to help to deliver this, and to everyone who's taken time to attend. We're very privileged.